2 weeks before my daughter's wedding, she looked me in the eyes and quietly said, "Dad, Ryan's family doesn't want you there." I smiled, took one last sip of my coffee, and replied, "I understand." She thought I'd leave quietly and disappear from the biggest day of her life. What she didn't know was that 30 minutes later, I walked into my attorney's office and signed documents that erased Ryan's family's dreams forever. They thought they were marrying into an $18 million fortune. They had no idea that by sunset, not $1 would ever belong to them. 3 days after the wedding, my phone rang. It was my daughter. She wasn't crying. She was begging. "Dad, please, they ruined my life. My name is Daniel Carter, and this is the story of the one quiet decision that changed everything greed had built." My name is Daniel Carter. I'm 72 years old. People in Willow Creek knew me as the quiet old man who drove an old Ford pickup. They thought I lived a simple life, and I let them believe that. Because money has an interesting way of changing people, especially family. 21 years earlier, my wife, Sarah, passed away after a long battle with breast cancer. Before she closed her eyes for the last time, she squeezed my hand and whispered, "Promise me one thing. Raise Emily to be kind, not rich." Promised her. And I meant it. For years, Emily was my whole world. I packed her school lunches, braided her hair badly, burned pancakes almost every Sunday, and clapped louder than anyone else at every school play. When she wanted to study medicine, I sold my classic Mustang without telling her. When she graduated, I cried harder than she did. She hugged me and said, "Dad, one day I'll take care of you." I believed her. Then Ryan entered her life. At first he was charming, respectful, always calling me sir, always offering to carry groceries. But I noticed something strange. He never asked about my memories, only my money. "Mr. Carter, that old vineyard outside town, still yours?" I smiled. "Just a small piece of land." He nodded, but I saw the disappointment in his eyes, because what Ryan didn't know was that the small piece of land had become one of the most valuable vineyards in Texas, worth more than $18 million. Only 3 people knew the truth: me, my attorney, and my accountant. I never told Emily. I wanted someone to love me, not my bank account. Then everything changed. One Tuesday afternoon, Emily called. Her voice sounded nervous. "Dad, can we meet?" Smiled. "Of course, sweetheart. I'll bring your favorite blueberry pie." I had no idea that pie would come home untouched. I stood there holding the blueberry pie Emily loved since she was a little girl. For a moment I thought she'd smile. She didn't. Ryan stood up first. He didn't shake my hand. He simply pointed toward the empty chair. "Mr. Carter, please." His mother, Linda, didn't even look at me. She stirred her coffee as if I wasn't there. Emily forced a weak smile. "Thanks for coming, Dad." Sat down. Placed the pie in the middle of the table. No one touched it. That should have been my first warning. For a few awkward minutes, they talked about flowers, the wedding venue, the honeymoon in Italy. Not once did anyone ask how I was doing. Then Linda finally looked at me. Her smile was polite, but her eyes were cold. "Mr. Carter, I'll get straight to the point." I nodded. "Of course." She folded her hands. Our family has worked very hard to build a certain reputation. Ryan smiled proudly. Linda continued. The wedding will include judges, business owners, doctors, and several very important people. I smiled. That sounds wonderful. Then she said the sentence that changed everything. We don't think it's appropriate for you to attend. The cafe fell silent. Even the waitress standing nearby looked uncomfortable. I slowly turned toward Emily. She couldn't even look at me. Instead, she whispered, "Dad, please don't make this harder." Harder? I felt my heart crack. Linda leaned forward. It's nothing personal. We simply believe you don't fit the image we're trying to create. Ryan quickly added, We don't want people asking questions. What questions? I asked quietly. Ryan looked at my old denim jacket, then at the keys to my 20-year-old pickup truck lying on the table. Finally, he smiled. People might assume we come from ordinary backgrounds. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Emily quietly reached across the table, placed the wedding invitation in front of me, and slid it back into her purse without saying a word. That hurt more than anything Linda had said. I looked at my daughter, the little girl who once ran into my arms after every school play. Now she couldn't even meet my eyes. I took a slow sip of my coffee, smiled and calmly said, I understand. Ryan sighed with relief. Linda smiled for the first time. Emily whispered, Thank you, Dad. They thought I'd accepted defeat. None of them noticed that I left the blueberry pie untouched, or that as I walked toward the door, I pulled out my phone and sent just one message. James, I'm on my way. James replied almost instantly. I'll have the documents ready. The drive to James Parker's office took 22 minutes. 22 minutes to close one chapter of my life and begin another. James had been my attorney for nearly 30 years. He'd helped Sarah and me buy our first vineyard. He wrote our wills. And before Sarah died, she'd made him promise one thing. If Daniel ever comes to you because someone he loves betrays him, don't try to stop him. Just help him make the right decision. When I walked into his office, he looked up from his desk. One look at my face and he quietly said, They finally showed you who they are, didn't they? Smiled. They did. He didn't ask another question. Instead, he opened a thick leather folder. Inside were documents I'd never hoped to use. James looked at me. Daniel, once you sign these, nothing can be undone. I nodded. I know. He pushed the papers toward me. But before I touched the pen, I asked one question. If Sarah were sitting here, what would she tell me? James smiled sadly. She'd tell you, never reward people for loving your money more than they love you. I closed my eyes. For a moment I could almost hear Sarah laughing. Then I picked up the pen, one signature, then another, then a third. It took less than 3 minutes to erase every plan Ryan's family had ever imagined. James collected the papers, locked them inside his safe, turned the key and quietly said, From this moment on, your estate no longer belongs to the future they expected. I stood, buttoned my old denim jacket, and smiled. Good. As I reached the door, James stopped me. Daniel, there's one more thing. He handed me a small sealed envelope. Across the front, in Sarah's handwriting, were 6 simple words. Open this after the wedding. My heart skipped a beat. Sarah had written it almost 15 years ago. I slipped the envelope into my inside pocket. I wouldn't open it. Not yet. Because somehow, Sarah already knew this day would come. The next morning, I was watering Sarah's rose garden when someone knocked on my front door. I opened it. Linda stood there, holding a basket of homemade cookies. The same woman who had told me, less than 24 hours earlier, that I wasn't good enough to attend my own daughter's wedding. Now she was smiling. Good morning, Daniel. Not Mr. Carter, not Sir, just Daniel. Smiled politely. What can I do for you? She laughed softly. Oh, don't stand out here. We're family now. Family. Funny how quickly that word changes when people think they need something. I invited her inside. She looked around the house. Not at the family photographs, not at Sarah's piano, not at Emily's childhood drawings hanging on the wall. Her eyes went straight to the antique grandfather clock, then the oil paintings, then the silver tea set Sarah had inherited from her grandmother. She wasn't admiring memories. She was estimating value. I quietly asked, "Coffee?" She smiled. That would be lovely. A few minutes later, she sat across from me, holding the expensive china cup Sarah always used for guests. Then she leaned forward. Daniel, I think yesterday got a little emotional. I nodded. It certainly did. She sighed dramatically. You know how stressful weddings are. I hope you didn't take anything personally. I looked at her. You told me I wasn't welcome. She smiled again. Oh, that. I'm sure Emily explained it poorly. Then she continued. The truth is, we were only thinking about appearances. It wasn't meant to hurt you. Then she casually asked, So, what are your plans after the wedding? He shrugged. I haven't decided. She stirred her coffee. You'll probably sell this old place someday. It's much too big for one man. Smiled. Maybe. She looked relieved. Then she said the sentence that confirmed everything. If you ever decide to sell, Ryan and Emily would love to keep it in the family. There it was. Not concern, not love. The house. Always the house. I stood up, walked to the fireplace, and picked up an old photograph. It showed Sarah, Emily, and me standing in front of this very home. I handed it to Linda. This picture was taken the day we paid off the mortgage. She glanced at it for barely a second, then placed it back on the table without saying a word. She didn't care about the memory, only the building behind us. At that moment, I knew something with absolute certainty. Ryan hadn't come up with this plan. Linda had. She had been planning this long before the wedding invitations were printed. She finished her coffee, smiled warmly, and stood to leave. At the door, she turned around and said, I'm glad we're finally on the same side, Daniel. Smiled. So am I. She walked away believing she'd manipulated an old man. She never noticed that my security camera had recorded every single word she said. I looked at my phone. James rarely called unless something was important. I answered. Ryan contacted you. James sighed. He did. What did he want? James opened a file. He asked if your will had been updated recently. My eyebrows lifted. And? I told him I couldn't discuss a client's private affairs. Smiled. He didn't like that answer. James chuckled. No, he didn't. Apparently, Ryan had spent almost 15 minutes trying to convince James that, as Daniel's future son-in-law, he had a right to know. James paused, then quietly added, "He even offered me money." Froze. How much? $50,000. I couldn't help but laugh. Not because it was funny, because it proved exactly what Sarah had warned me about years ago. Greed always gets impatient. James continued. I refused, of course. But Daniel, I think they're getting nervous. I looked out my kitchen window. Linda's words echoed in my mind. We're family now. No, they weren't nervous because they loved me. They were nervous because they didn't know how much they were about to lose. The next afternoon, Emily called. Her voice sounded unusually cheerful. Hi, Dad. It had been weeks since she'd sounded that happy. I was wondering, would you like to come over for dinner tonight? Smiled. Really? Of course. Ryan's idea or yours? Silence. Then she laughed awkwardly. Ryan thought it would be nice. I already knew the answer. Still, I accepted. 7 o'clock? Perfect. That evening, their new house looked beautiful. Fresh flowers, soft music, an expensive dinner. Ryan greeted me with a smile so wide it almost looked painful. Daniel, so glad you came. Yesterday, I was an embarrassment. Today I was suddenly Daniel. Funny how respect appears when money is involved. Dinner was perfect. Too perfect. Ryan poured expensive wine. Linda complimented my jacket. Emily smiled more than she had in months. Then, right after dessert, Ryan placed a small leather folder on the table. My heart didn't race, because I already knew exactly what was inside. Ryan cleared his throat. Daniel, this isn't anything complicated. It's just something to make life easier for everyone. He slowly slid the folder toward me, then placed a gold pen beside it. Linda smiled. We're sure you'll do what's best for family. I looked at the folder, then at the 3 faces watching me. Every one of them expected the same thing, a signature. Instead, I gently closed the folder, pushed it back across the table, and smiled. Sorry. You're about 2 days too late. The smile disappeared from Ryan's face. What do you mean 2 days too late? I looked at the leather folder, then calmly slid it back toward him. I mean, if you'd asked me last week, I probably would have signed. Silence. Linda frowned. What changed? Smiled. You did. Ryan forced a laugh. Daniel, I'm not sure I understand. Oh, I think you do. I stood up, buttoned my old jacket, then looked directly at Emily. Sweetheart, do you remember what your mother always used to say? Emily looked confused. No, I answered for her. Never make permanent decisions about people after they've shown you temporary kindness. Ryan interrupted. This has nothing to do with your late wife. Slowly turned toward him. No, it has everything to do with her. The room fell silent. Then I reached into my pocket and placed a small envelope on the table. It wasn't legal papers. It wasn't a check. It was a photograph. Ryan picked it up. It showed me Sarah and little Emily standing in front of the vineyard, nearly 30 years earlier. On the back, Sarah had written one sentence. "One day, we'll leave this to someone who protects our family, not someone who profits from it." Ryan tossed the photo onto the table. "We're talking about today." I nodded. "Exactly. So am I." Then I looked at Emily. "Did Ryan ever tell you he visited my attorney 3 days ago?" Emily frowned. "What?" Ryan's face turned pale. He continued. "He offered James $50,000 to tell him what was in my will." Emily stared at Ryan. "Tell me that's not true." Ryan didn't answer. Linda spoke instead. "That's ridiculous." Smiled. "Is it?" I reached into my jacket, pulled out my phone, and pressed play. James's recorded voicemail filled the room. "Daniel, Ryan offered me $50,000 today to reveal your estate. I refused. Call me when you can." The room became deadly quiet. Emily slowly looked at Ryan. "You bribed Dad's lawyer." Ryan stood up. "I can explain." Emily stepped back. "No, I asked you a question." Linda quickly interrupted. "It wasn't a bribe. It was a consultation fee." I almost laughed. James had warned me. Greedy people don't panic because they're innocent. They panic because they get caught. I picked up my hat and walked toward the front door. Before leaving, I turned around one last time and quietly said, "The saddest part isn't that you wanted my money. It's that you thought an old man wouldn't notice." I opened the door and walked away. Behind me I heard shouting, Emily's voice, Ryan's voice, Linda screaming. For the first time in weeks I smiled. Not because I'd won, because the truth had finally started doing my work for me. The next morning, my phone buzzed. One message from Ryan. "We need to talk." Not "can we talk?" Not "please." Just "we need to talk." I smiled. Amazing how quickly pride disappears when money does. I replied with only 4 words. "Tomorrow. My vineyard, noon." The next day, Ryan arrived alone. No Emily, no Linda, just him. For the first time since I'd met him, he looked nervous. As he stepped out of his car, he stared across the endless rows of grapevines. "Daniel, I never realized this place was so beautiful." I smiled. "You never came here to look at it. You came to find out what it was worth." His face tightened. "I made mistakes." "We all do." I was under pressure. Folded my arms. "From whom?" He hesitated, then finally admitted, "My mother." He nodded. "I know. But no one forced you to offer my lawyer $50,000. Ryan looked down. "No, they didn't." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then he took a deep breath. "I'll tell Emily everything. I'll apologize. But please, don't punish her because of me." That sentence caught me by surprise. For the first time, Ryan sounded honest. Then he ruined it. He quietly added, "After all, she'll still inherit everything one day." There it was. Even his apology ended with money. I couldn't help but smile. "Ryan, you still don't understand." He frowned. "Understand what?" I slowly reached into my jacket, removed a folded document, and handed it to him. He opened it. His eyes scanned the first page. Then his hands began to shake. "What is this?" "It's public record." He kept reading. The color disappeared from his face. The Carter family estate has been transferred to the Sarah Carter Family Legacy Trust. Ryan looked up, confused. A trust? I nodded. Everything. The vineyard, the investments, the land, every dollar. He swallowed hard. So Emily owns the trust? I smiled. No, neither of you do. His breathing became heavier. Then who does? I looked across the vineyard, remembering Sarah's smile, then quietly answered, people who deserve a future. Ryan stared at me. You gave it away. I protected it. No judge, no husband, no divorce, no greedy family can ever touch it now. Ryan dropped the papers. He whispered, my mother is going to lose her mind. I looked him straight in the eyes, then calmly replied, no, Ryan. She already lost the moment she mistook kindness for weakness. Turned and walked away, leaving him standing alone in a vineyard he would never own. I opened the front door. Emily stood there. Her makeup was ruined. Her eyes were swollen from crying, and the engagement ring Ryan had proudly placed on her finger was gone. She looked at me for a long moment, then whispered, Dad, what did Ryan hide from me? Stepped aside. Come in. She walked into the house she'd grown up in. Nothing had changed. Her mother's piano, the old family photographs, the smell of fresh coffee, but she had changed. She looked broken. I placed a cup of coffee in front of her. She wrapped both hands around it, just like Sarah used to. Finally, she spoke. I found messages. I didn't interrupt. Ryan and Linda were talking about your money months before he proposed. My heart didn't race, because deep down, I'd already known. Emily pulled out her phone, her hands shaking. She opened one message, then turned the screen toward me. It was from Linda. Once Daniel is gone, the vineyard belongs to Emily. After that, Ryan will handle everything. Another message. Keep Daniel happy until the wedding. Don't argue with him yet. Another. Make sure he changes the house before the ceremony. Emily burst into tears. I wasn't their family. I was their investment. For a moment I said nothing, then quietly asked, Did Ryan ever love you? She looked at the floor. I don't know anymore. Just then my phone rang. James, I answered. Daniel, you need to know something. What is it? He took a deep breath. Ryan and Linda filed an emergency petition this morning. Emily looked up. What? James continued. They're claiming you promised the vineyard to them before the wedding. I almost laughed. They forged emails. They're trying to stop the trust before it becomes permanent. Emily covered her mouth. They forged your name? James answered, Yes, but they made one mistake. What mistake? James smiled. I have security footage and witnesses. I slowly looked at Emily, then quietly said, Your wedding is over. Now the real battle begins. The courthouse was packed. Ryan sat beside his attorney. Linda wore a confident smile. She looked around the courtroom as if she'd already won. When she saw me enter, she whispered loud enough for me to hear, Old men don't win battles like this. I simply smiled and took my seat. A few minutes later, the judge walked in. Everyone stood. Ryan's attorney spoke first. Your Honor, My clients were promised ownership of the Carter Vineyard before the wedding. They have emails and written proof. The judge nodded. Present your evidence. Ryan smiled confidently. His lawyer handed over several printed emails. The judge examined them carefully, then looked at my attorney. Mr. Parker, your response? James slowly stood. Your Honor, my client has only one question. He turned toward Ryan. Mr. Brooks, would you please tell the court when these emails were supposedly written? Ryan answered immediately. 3 months ago. James nodded. Interesting. He walked toward the courtroom screen and pressed one button. A security video appeared. It showed Ryan walking into James's office, trying to bribe him. The entire courtroom fell silent. James paused the video, then calmly asked, Mr. Brooks, if Mr. Carter had already promised you the vineyard, why were you offering me $50,000 to see his will? Ryan froze. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. James pressed another button. A forensic computer expert stood up. Your Honor, we examined every email submitted by the plaintiffs. He held up a report. Every single one was created 2 days after Mr. Carter changed his estate. The courtroom erupted. Linda jumped to her feet. That's impossible. The expert calmly replied, No, ma'am. It's digital evidence. It cannot be changed. Ryan slowly looked at his mother. His face turned white. She had promised him everything would work. Instead, everything was falling apart. Then the judge leaned forward, his voice turning cold. Mr. Brooks, did you knowingly submit forged evidence to this court? Ryan couldn't answer. For the first time in his life, money couldn't save him. No one moved. The courtroom became completely silent. Ryan looked at his attorney, searching for an answer. There wasn't one. The judge slowly removed his glasses, then looked directly at Ryan. Mr. Brooks, you lied under oath. You attempted to steal another man's property, and you submitted forged evidence to this court. Ryan lowered his head. For the first time, the confident man Emily had fallen in love with looked terrified. Then the judge turned toward Linda. And Mrs. Brooks, I have reviewed the text messages recovered from both phones. Linda's face instantly lost its color. The judge picked up one printed page, then read it aloud. Once Daniel signs everything over, we'll make sure he never steps inside that house again. The courtroom fell silent. Another message. After the wedding, he'll be alone anyway. Emily closed her eyes. Tears rolled down her face. Every word came from Linda's phone. The judge looked at Linda. You didn't just encourage greed. You planned it. Linda tried to speak. But no words came out. The judge signed several papers, then calmly announced, This court dismisses every claim against Mr. Carter. He paused. And I am referring this case to the district Attorney's Office for Investigation into fraud, attempted theft, and forged evidence. Ryan nearly collapsed into his chair. Linda burst into tears. Everything they had planned had turned into a nightmare. As people began leaving the courtroom, Ryan suddenly ran toward me. Daniel, please. I'll fix everything. I'll apologize. I'll do anything. I looked into his eyes. For months, he had seen me as nothing more than an old man standing between him and a fortune. Now he finally saw me as Emily's father. I quietly answered, "Ryan, you never wanted my forgiveness. You wanted my money." He dropped to his knees. "Please, I love Emily." Before I could answer, Emily walked forward. She looked at Ryan, then slowly removed the engagement ring from her purse. She placed it in his hand. Her voice was calm. "If you loved me, you would have protected my father. Instead, you tried to steal from him." Ryan stood frozen. Emily turned around and walked toward me. Without saying a word, she wrapped her arms around me and whispered through her tears, "Dad, I'm so sorry." I closed my eyes. For a moment, it felt like holding the little girl who used to run into my arms after school. I kissed her forehead and quietly said, "Come home." She cried even harder, because she finally understood. The one person she'd pushed away was the only one who never stopped loving her. That evening, Emily sat beside me on the old wooden porch, the same porch where she'd waited for the school bus as a little girl. Neither of us spoke for a long time. The vineyard was quiet. The wind moved gently through the vines. Then I remembered the envelope, the one James had handed me after I signed the trust documents. Across the front, in Sarah's handwriting, were 6 simple words: "Open this after the wedding." I slowly broke the seal. Emily looked at the handwriting and whispered, "Mom." Inside was one letter. I began reading. "My dearest Daniel, if you're reading this, the wedding has already happened. I don't know if today brought joy or heartbreak, but I know you. If someone has hurt you, you'll be tempted to protect yourself. Please remember, we never built this vineyard to make people rich. We built it to reveal who they really were. If greed ever enters our family, don't reward it. Protect what we spent our lives building. And if Emily loses her way, don't stop loving her. Just make sure she earns her way back. Because real love never removes responsibility. It simply gives someone the chance to become better. I love you. Always, Sarah." Carefully folded the letter. Neither of us could speak. Finally, Emily looked at me with tears running down her face. "Dad, I almost traded the only person who truly loved me for people who only loved what you owned." I gently held her hand. "You made a mistake, but mistakes don't have to become a life sentence." The following Monday, James officially appointed Emily not as the owner, but as the newest trainee on the board of the Sarah Carter Family Legacy Trust. She would earn every responsibility exactly the way Sarah and I once had. No shortcuts, no special treatment. A month later, Ryan accepted a plea agreement. His professional license was revoked. The fraud investigation remained on his permanent record. Linda was forced to sell the home she'd spent years bragging about, just to pay legal expenses. Neither of them ever received a single dollar from the Carter family. Not because I took revenge with anger, but because I protected what they were trying to steal. The truth did the rest. One evening, Emily and I stood together, watching the sunset over the vineyard. She smiled through her tears. "Dad, Mom was right." I looked at her. She quietly said, "Love isn't proven by the promises people make at a wedding. It's proven by the people who stay beside you after everything falls apart." I smiled, looked toward the sky, and softly whispered, We kept our promise, Sarah. The vineyard was never really worth $18 million. Its greatest value was teaching the next generation that character is inherited, not money. And in the end, Ryan lost the fortune he chased. Linda lost the future she planned. Emily found the father she almost lost. And I learned the greatest revenge isn't destroying the people who betrayed you. It's making sure they never profit from the love they betrayed. The end.